Thank you
Great.
very much for taking time to be with me, Jen Richards.
Yeah,
Jen, this
sorry,
is,
Don. They have us a whole series, so I had to I'm a minute late because I had to shovel some lunch in.
would you please? Oh my God, you're such a thin person. You have to eat.
I've gained
Good for
20
you.
pounds during the pandemic.
Oh, I found them. I found them. I found them. Yeah. I'm on Weight Watchers. I've lost 10 pounds since October. I feel really great. And,
Congrats.
Jenny Boylan inspired me. So I said, all right, if she can do it, I can do it. Can we get the elephant, the Republican elephant out of the way? Would you be okay with that if we talk about
Yes.
a certain co-star of yours from the past?
Ugh.
I only want to know this. What can you say about Caitlyn Jenner?
I think what's actually productive to say, because for the most part, I wish we could just ignore her. And I don't even take her political run in good faith, because I'm sure anyone who's advising her has made it very clear she has absolutely no chance of winning. So this seems like a very self-serving campaign, and one that is already doing damage to others. I think if there's anything to be productive, anything to be said that could be productive is the recognition that just because you're a member of a marginalized community doesn't mean that you're in a position to speak to their issues in a cogent and helpful way. And further, that when the world sees and treats you as a straight white man for enough years, that there's a certain amount of entitlement that comes with that, that takes a lot of work to undo, a tremendous amount of work. And it's fine if someone doesn't want to do that work, but if you're going to be in the public eye and speak to issues that have a material impact on others, I think you have a moral imperative to do that work. And I've never seen any evidence that Caitlyn has done or has any interest in doing such work. And that's all I'll say.
And I think that's enough. And I just got off, before I talked to you, I got off an interview with a California radio station, and it's the same thing. It's just, let's move on, please. She's shown us who she is, and now we must move on. You have shown us over the years who you are, which is producer, writer, actor, and now star. Are you ready for that word next to your name?
Oh, I don't think I'm a star. No, no, I'm not ready for that for that word. I just want to be. Oh, I just want to work. I love working. I love acting. I love writing, and I want to keep doing it. And that's as far as my ambition goes.
How different is this particular role that you're playing, given that you were in the writer's room as well, compared to, say, a character you created for her story? Gosh, that was 6 years ago.
Yeah. Remarkably, it wasn't that different, and that's a credit to how incredibly collaborative Elizabeth Cleveter was, who was running the writer's room for Clarice, as well as Alex Kurtzman and Jenny LeMay, the showrunners, all of whom had seen Disclosure and had a pretty good grasp of issues generally around trans representation, the pitfalls of the past, what needs to be done and done better, as well as the specific issues around the complicated legacy of the Buffalo Bill character and the way that's impacted trans lives. So you put all that together, and then having a chance to be in the writer's room and help construct the character from the start, and then fairly early knowing that I was actually going to play that character, gave me a lot of freedom and latitude to shape the character. And also had the privilege of working with Eleanor Jean, who wrote the first episode that the character appears in, who's a wonderful writer and a trans woman, and was also a writer on Mrs. Fletcher, which I had been previously on HBO. So all the pieces were there to make this really engaged for me from the very beginning.
Eleanor and Elizabeth spoke to me, and they both raved about who is Jen Richards is. And we all agreed that you are a real active participant. You are not a wallflower. You get in there and you get your hands dirty. And I'm wondering, I'm wondering, where do you draw that line where you know you're the actor, but you also know, look, these lines weren't just like, imagined. People worked hard at writing them and making them real. but at the same time, you have to say them. I used to be an actor a long time ago, so I have a little idea of what this is about. But I'm wondering if you could explain to those people who aren't acting experts or in the business, as you say, how do you make that disconnect between the writer producer and the actor?
And that's a very good question. And there isn't a clean line. And it can vary from actor to actor and from scene to scene, depending on their director, the co-stars, etc. I certainly felt empowered on this particular one because I was involved with the creation of the character. I think anytime I'm playing an explicitly trans character who speaks to trans issues, I often feel empowered to speak up because of my lived experience. And more generally, I'm just very headstrong, opinionated, and don't really object to ruffling feathers or being a problem, particularly when it comes to trans representation specifically. There's a little bit of diva in it, but it's less diva and more, I feel a more responsibility to craft trans characters in a way that will do good and not do damage. And so if I have an opportunity to intervene at a point that can shift that dynamic from one direction to another, or simply just elevate it from a good place to a great place, then I'm going to take that opportunity. And at my age and my experience, I am definitely not shy about that.
Your age, oh my goodness, you young thing. Now, when I came out at ABC News, I had to tell HR that before people just called me a tough boss, but now I'm a bitch because they see the same energy, but from a female perspective. One trans woman to another, how do you migrate that energy you had in terms of, you're born with a certain charisma and a certain drive, but you also want to make sure that people still see you as feminine?
So I've never been asked that question. That's a really interesting insight. I have to give credit to my mom. I growing up in the 80s and 90s, my mom worked in banking and was a manager, and she was like the only female manager like in the region. When I played sports in high school, she was the only mom on the sidelines. It was like my mom and all the dads. My mom has been sued. She's been fired. She is also very smart and very opinionated, and was just kind of, she was very feminine. She's a traditional Southern woman and very beautiful, but she speaks her mind and she's not shy about it. And growing up, I heard her called bitch a lot. Like I heard that specific word about my mom a lot. And my mom kind of took it as a point of pride that to her, and she framed this for me as a child, like if you're a strong woman who stands up for what you think is right, who advocates for yourself, and isn't shy about your opinion or your ambition or your own self-worth, you will be called by others a bitch, and you should be proud of it. And so I think I've just internalized that kind of, strong Southern woman working in a man's world kind of attitude. So I guess I have been, that's not something I've ever reflected on, but I'm suddenly very grateful for that legacy from my mom, and that I wasn't burdened with worrying too much about being delicate or overly feminine. I had a lot of really strong women in my family, and I just wanted to be one of them.
I know the feeling. And I must say, Nashville also gave you an opportunity to channel that Southern energy. That must have been a blast.
It was. I love the city of Nashville, and Hayden was a really great co-star and very friendly. And I got to have a lot of great food and hear a lot of great music while I was down there filming that.
Well, while we're dropping names, you mentioned Disclosure before. And what bigger name in the universe, I mean, besides me, could be than Oprah, who just
Oh,
gave
right?
Disclosure a big shout out.
Yeah.
Disclosure!
Yeah, that was incredible. In her interview with Elliot last week, uh, who I'm so proud of. Side note, by the way, I've
No,
known
please do.
Elliot.
Well, let's talk about Elliot as much as we can.
Yeah, he's just such a good guy. I knew him a little bit from Tales of the City, and then we were both, when I was working on Clarice in Toronto, he was there working on Umbrella Academy, and so we hung out. And I was so struck by how much more in his own skin and how much more comfortable and happier he seemed now than when I saw him during Tales of the City. And that kind of, gender euphoria is always such, it's predictable, but it's such a pleasure to actually witness in someone. And I thought he handled that interview with real grace. And yeah, boy, Oprah has come a long way. She's come a long way since her interviews used to be really inappropriate and invasive and kind of tawdry to having a really pretty sophisticated understanding of trans people. And I was really impressed that through that whole interview, she never once referred to Elliot by an old name or an old pronoun. Was very mindful throughout that. It was a fantastic interview, and I was super thrilled. I had forgotten the interview was even happening until a bunch of friends of mine started texting me like, Oprah's talking about disclosure. She loved it. Someone's like, what if you made Oprah cry? Really struck by that thought, and I can't stop thinking about it.
Oh,
It's
well, I'll
incredible.
have to reach out. I'll have to ask her.
It's incredible to see the impact that disclosure has had on the industry. It was very quick and kind of seismic. There's been a noticeable and irrevocable shift in the kind of common ground understanding of trans people in Hollywood. It's vastly improved. It's really exciting.
In Hollywood, but unfortunately not across the United States. We have some terrible things that are going on. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about when this episode runs, there are going to be closeted trans kids and trans people who will see you and see the story and say, that could be me. How do I get to where you are? What message do you want to send through either this interview or through your performance to help people who are afraid to come out of the closet, given all the hate that's out there?
I think the real message is in the show itself, like just in the portrayal, like that does most of the work. I think just seeing a smart, capable trans woman who has love in her life, who has friendships in her life, who has a successful career, and nonetheless risks that all in order to stand up and do what's right for other people. I think that sends the loudest message. But I also think just being an out trans actor, and one of many now, you can pretty much tune to any channel and see an out trans person on television, often playing a trans role, shows on an unconscious level that there is hope, that there is a path forward for everybody, that we are a part of the world, that we're not isolated, that we are loved, and that we can find success, which doesn't always do much to soften the sting of the kind of legislative efforts to wipe us out of existence that are happening right now. I mean, I get saddened or enraged. I feel like I'm constantly alternating between, depressed exhaustion and just utter rage, particularly when I think about kids being harmed by bigoted adults, and all done in this very malinformed kind of performative way that really has very little to do with the actual issue, and more just a way of signaling to their base that they don't like us. And that's hard to do. But something I said in a previous interview at a roundtable when I was with Laverne Cox and Alexander Billings and Brian Michael Smith
Love them all.
yeah, all great people. One of the things we talked about then is the fact that all of us came up under even worse conditions. Granted, we weren't in the public eye as much, and we weren't a kind of national object of derision. But in terms of the individual rights that we had, and in terms of our ability to access health care or employment protections, the situation was actually much, much worse. It has gotten materially better since then. It's just that we're always trying to push it even further and further. And that's going to come up against more and more resistance. But the fact that we have come up under those conditions and we have still managed to thrive means that these young people can too. And often it's exactly this kind of opposition that really becomes the crucible which forges a strength and dignity and resilience and resolve that will carry these young people, through the rest of their lives, and will become a profound source of strength and pride in who they are. And so I'm hoping the long-term good that comes out of this short-term horror outweighs the damage that's been done. But that's more hope than anything.
You're very active on social media, and thank goodness for that. How do you deal with the trolls? How do you deal with the people who are just there sitting in their pajamas in their mom's basement, and their avatars are basically just hating on you? What do you do?
Oh, I don't see it. Uh, I set up all these filters on Twitter, so I don't see it at all, and that's been really liberating. Previously, prior to discovering these filters, which can really make a huge difference, I it was a combination of things. Like sometimes I ignore them. I did find one, and I'll share this one technique because I think it might be useful for other people. Someone had said something awful to me and it had gotten kind of lodged in my head. And then so I went and looked them up and looked at the other things that they were saying. And all of a sudden it went from like, oh, this one person thinks I'm awful. And because I kind of think I'm awful too, it's sticking in my head to like, oh, this person thinks, Obama is a Muslim bent on destroying the American way of life and like Jews are evil. It's like, oh, why do I care what you think about me? Like, you're just a hateful idiot. And then all of a sudden it just kind of loses all of its air, and it just seems ridiculous. So since that point, I'm just like, you know what, I just don't even need to see it. I'll just wipe it all out, ignore it. I know a lot of trans people who seem to get some kind of satisfaction out of battling with the trolls, and bless you all for doing that, but I've got too much else to do to be distracted by that. Like me personally, like it'll get in my head and I just don't want to see it. So I never read the comments on anything.
Never
I'm
read
very
the
careful about,
comments.
yeah, very careful about what I see on Twitter because living well is the best revenge in a lot of ways, and I've got a lot going on and I just want to keep doing that and doing that well. And so I kind of allow myself for that just to become noise. There's that great Brene Brown talk on dealing with critics where she talks about the Roosevelt quote, and I really do see it that way. Like other people who are engaged in social justice issues, are engaged in political work, or deal with trans issues, or in particular are active in creating content for the world. If they have a critique of me, I'm going to listen to that because they're also they're in the arena, they're dirty and bloody, and they get it. And I'm certainly extraordinarily fallible and have a lot of blind spots. So if something comes from one of those people that says, hey, you did this thing wrong, just a real quick example, I used some language on Twitter the other day referring to someone as stupid and dumb, and someone very nicely pointed out that that was ableist language and sent me some resources on how that was and better alternatives, and that kind of thing I'll listen to and really take that in and try and do better. But if it's someone just screaming hate like that, I just allow that to be the noise coming from the stands, like people who don't really know what the struggle is like, who haven't done the work, who aren't out here. And so I give my permission just to completely ignore it and focus on what needs to be done.
Well, hats off to you for that, because I'm glad I saw your thread that basically not only did it help educate me, I'm sure it helped educate a lot of other people too. We often use words that we don't really think about the impact. So here's a word, trans. I say that being trans is the 5th most interesting thing about me. What are the other 4 things about you, Jen Richards?
I don't know that my being trans even ranks, honestly. I always think about how at one point my mom expressed almost a little disappointment that through transition I'd become less interesting, because pre-transition, like I was kind of different. I was not like other boys, I like in my family, my Southern family, like all the guys would be in one room watching football and all the women would be in the kitchen, like cooking and talking. And I loved the women in my family and they were such great storytellers. And that's the space I wanted to be in. And that was kind of interesting and different pre-transition. And now it's just like, oh, you are just another basic white Southern lady. Like there is nothing that interesting about you.
Okay, so
So
after this, I'm gonna
if
have
it
to
is
connect with your
interesting,
mom.
if it is interesting at all, it's that through transition, I became much more empathetic and compassionate, understanding of what it felt like to be marginalized and discriminated against, and created a fire in me to work against injustice and to help people with less than me. So it's an interesting aspect of my narrative and the way that it shaped my ethos. But in terms of a kind of day-to-day reality, it really hardly ever even comes up.
I know the feeling. I ask this question at the end of every interview, and I probably asked it when I talked to you last 6 years ago. I may have forgotten to ask you something, or maybe you're prepared to answer a question that I didn't ask. Is there anything that you want to make sure our readers know about you that I didn't ask, or about the show?
Well, yeah, something that I think is really worth noting on the show is it's an incredible cast and crew. And I felt, despite being a guest star who comes in late in the season, they really made me feel like part of the family. And one extraordinary little detail is that several other of the cast members have trans children. And it's really interesting to come from a place where I would often walk on set and be the only trans person anyone had ever met, and quite possibly the first trans person, anyone had ever met, to coming onto a set where people kind of already know the issues. They know trans people, and some of them even have trans people in their family. And it allows me to not just be a trans person. I can, talk about all my other interests and connect with the co-stars in other ways. But yeah, more generally, Canadian casts and crews are just really, really good people. And this show, not just in my storyline, but in storylines with several of the main characters. Like one of the most intriguing aspects of the show to me is the way that it unpacks the relationship between Clarice and Ardelia, who was like her best friend in the original movie. And we see that Clarice has been able to advance in ways that Ardelia hasn't because of their race. And I just think it was so astute and smart and handled really well, the way that Alex and Jenny and Elizabeth, the showrunners of Clarice, have decided to take on a whole host of different kinds of issues around marginalized identities and systemic oppression, and make good television out of it. And it's really exciting, and I'm thrilled to be part of it.
I think it's exciting too. And Alex Kurtzman, who I've been following for years now because of Star Trek, is sort of taking the original Star Trek model of taking modern problems and telling them in a different lens.
Exactly. I love that. I really do.
Would you tell him that we want to see a trans woman, maybe played by Jen Richards, on Star Trek in a regular role?
I gotta say, I would take that. I really liked working in Toronto. I don't know Star Trek, but I know and trust Alex, and
you can do anything.
What my co-star from Clarice is also on Star Trek, and my old friend Wilson Cruz is on there as well. So it seems like it seems like a great family to be part of. So yes, if any Star Trek fans are listening or reading, send in your letters.
So Jen Richards, what's next for you? And then we'll let you go.
I have several TV shows in development right now, at least one of which will most likely come out sometime next year, maybe two of which. So that's all my time has just been kind of like quietly pounding away at the keys off camera, and hopefully the world gets to see the results of all that labor soon.
I look forward to seeing it. Jen Richards, thank you so much for taking time to talk with me.
Pleasure.
This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.